Well, we first met back in, I think it was 1994. We were both working in the same place. I think we first went out on about the 11th of November 1994.
Very good, yes.
And ended up getting married in the May 1996.
Yes. Yeah, so all went well with his pregnancy up until the late stages in pregnancy, but they were more issues that I had, nothing that really was going to affect him at all. Same with Sophie. I was diabetic during pregnancy with both of them. The typical high blood pressure, those kinds of things, and due to that, they were both born through emergency caesarean, just 3 weeks early for Josh and 2 weeks early for Sophie. But both born very healthy, no issues at all. When Sophie was about 18 months, we travelled to America. Over there she got quite sick, but we just figured it was a virus that she had picked up in some way, maybe something she'd picked up on the plane. But she got very sick very quickly. Within the space of about a day and a half, she went from running around happy to extremely high fevers, very lethargic, just off. She's a very active, very happy little girl, and she just wasn't at all. We took her to the nearest hospital, which was a private hospital in Naples. They treated her instantly. We walked into the emergency room. They took one look at her, and doctors came from everywhere. They treated her as having swine flu, gave her some antibiotics, kept her in for most of the night just to try and get her fevers down, and then sent us on our way with some medication. After about 2 days, she got a little bit better, was feeling better, and the only thing that persisted was a rash that she had formed on her cheeks. But we just figured that that was maybe just eczema, something like that. She was back to her normal happy self. We didn't ever really think anything more of it. When we got back, we took her straight to a dermatologist, paediatric dermatologist, and they diagnosed her with discoid eczema on the face, gave her some steroid creams, but it never went away. About a year later, she started losing her hair. And at first I just thought I was brushing it too hard. I was putting it up too tight. She was pulling it. I noticed hair on her pillow of a morning. And it wasn't until my sisters mentioned to me, trying to be discreet, I suppose, what's going on with her hair. It's quite obvious. And I suppose that just gave me something that I needed to say, okay, I'm not just being paranoid, I'm not just reading into it, I need to go and get this looked at. And it was really scary because lupus was unknown to us. We had heard the name dropped on TV shows. I didn't know what it was going to involve. I was convinced it was a death sentence for her. I guess the scariest moment for me so far, and for Mark, was after she had the biopsy. She got extremely sick. I was putting her to bed and I could feel that she was damp, and I thought, oh, that's unlike her to be wet before bedtime. And I checked and she was bleeding quite heavily. I rang Mark. Mark was actually at work. I rang quite hysterically. Get home, and I put her in the car, took her to the hospital. You met me there. It was happening so quickly, but it felt like slow motion to me. I felt like I'd been sitting in that emergency room for hours, not knowing what was wrong, not knowing whether or not she was going to be okay. She looked terrible to look at her. She wasn't as coherent as normal. She didn't have colour. It's hard to put into words, I suppose, as a mother and a father, how that makes you feel.
Dr. Singh had said and diagnosed that it is lupus because she'd had a series of symptoms, and she'd had the hair loss, she'd had the rash on the cheeks, she'd had the ANA marker in her blood. Her kidney biopsy indicated that it could be lupus, and then her platelet count had dropped very low.
I was convinced that, okay, there's been an error in pathology 3 times that night. And then Dr. Singh rang through to the emergency department and said there was no error. My parents were away at the time, and to ring them to try and fill them in on what was going on when I didn't know myself. I would ring, I was very upset, and they'd be saying, what's happening? And all I could say was, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. The scariest thing for me was, I suppose the thing with lupus is so many of the symptoms were accurate and so many were so far off. And that's what I found confusing. Part of the length in the diagnosis was the fact that she was so little. The doctors were dumbfounded to think, why so young? Normally, they told us that it would happen around puberty, would be around about the youngest. So to be diagnosed at 2.5 was even surprising to a team of doctors that have been doctors for a long time.
I think it was just that fear of the unknown. Was given that she was so young that they couldn't tell us what was the likely outcome, what would happen in 5 years or 10 years' time, and even what was the long-term effects of being on medication for long periods of time. Look, I think Sophie does have a degree of understanding around her illness. She certainly talks a lot about lupus, and her doctor, Dr. Singh, has been fantastic trying to explain that to her each time that he does see her and throughout, I suppose, this journey. But I don't think she understands what it means for her in the longer term. That, it's not a disease that gets easier, it actually gets more challenging the older she gets. I don't think she understands that yet. I think for when she gets older, look, we want her to have obviously a normal life around, having a family, getting married, having a good job, things like that. But again, we know that when it comes to the time of having a family, it's going to present its own challenges once again. Any type of education is going to be good for her. I don't think for one moment it's going to be a defining moment that she gets to a certain age and that's when she's going to understand it all. I think she's going to put pieces of the puzzle together the older she gets. I suppose our biggest fear is that when she does hit her teens, that's probably when she'll start to understand some of the complications that may come with having children in the future. I think that's probably going to be one of the most challenging things to deal with when that time comes.
I have a close family. My family are very supportive of Sophie and what I'm feeling through all of this. But in saying that, I suppose because of their limited knowledge of the disease, I got a lot of, I'm paranoid, she's healthy, I thought the lupus had gone now, that she's better, wasn't that a year ago? A lot of feelings unintentionally portrayed by them as get over it, move on. So I felt like I needed to justify to the people that were closest to me, this is why I'm paranoid, read this, and this will make you realise why I feel the way that I do, why I live every moment looking at her extra closely. And then I started to see that, you know what, she was a happy little girl. She got on, she moved on, I didn't. She's active, she's healthy, she's happy, she loves school, she loves dancing, riding her motorbike, wrestling with her brother. She has a lot more energy than most 4-year-olds. I think the initial step of sharing Sophie's story, Sophie's journey, and the story of our family was initially difficult because it was still very raw, brought up a lot of raw emotions. However, I felt that it was necessary for Sophie's future to raise as much awareness as we can for people to understand this disease, so that when she's older, hopefully, more people will show an understanding, an ability to accept what's going to be happening through her. And I feel like that's one of the most important things for us. Yes, one, raising funds. We need to continue to fight for a world without lupus. That is obviously our ideal dream. But in working towards that, I think the most important thing is raising the awareness. And if sharing Sophie's story is going to do that, well, we're all for it.